Hello and welcome to Learn Plus. I'm Brenda Bailey Hughes, your facilitator for this discussion. This particular LinkedIn Live is geared towards leaders in organizations, towards training and development or learning and development folks. And we hope that you get some really practical tips out of this session, specifically today about using data, presenting with data in really wise ways. About maybe it's been a year now, I was coaching an executive who was a brilliant strategist, just one of the smartest people I'd ever met, and did such an admirable job of communicating or making decisions based on good data. And that is something I think we desperately need in our corporate settings, right? We need people who are not just always going with what feels easy or feels easiest or fun or whatever, like make decisions based on data. And he was, and I so admired that. And yet when he went to present his information to people, it became this sort of massive data dump that made no sense to anyone, overwhelmed them. And then I could see other executives making decisions that were not based on such good data that he had, but that made more sense to them just because of the way it was presented. And so we worked and worked and worked to change his approach from, we've got a visual here that went viral in LinkedIn a few months ago, or about a month ago, a few weeks ago, where data was where he started, where it was just like this data dump, just this massive chaos. And we tried to figure out, okay, dumping it's not enough, let's sort it. From sorting it, let's arrange it, let's present it visually, and finally let's tell a story with this. And if you're trying to convince someone using that sort of first visual of just crazy data dump, you're not going to have any luck. People aren't going to hear you. People aren't going to be influenced by you. But if you take that same data, you get it organized, you get it sorted, you get it visually mapped, you get a story behind it that flows, that makes sense to people, now you're not just going to be an evidence-based decision maker, which we want, but you're going to be an evidence-based decision maker who is influential. And that is the essence of great leadership. I see some of you are putting in the comments where you're from. Great to see you, Chris from Tennessee. We've got Shelby behind the scenes today. She's also a Tennessee gal. Paige, from Bloomington. Paige, welcome. So glad that you're here. One of our guest speakers today, students. That's awesome. Oh, and Shelby says Chris is actually a neighbor. That's awesome. So I'm coming from Bloomington, Indiana as well, where Paige is, and our two guest speakers who I want to introduce you to. These two are both instructors and educators at the Kelley School of Business, where I taught for over 25 years, or 20 plus years. Professor Anna Deeds and Professor Rebecca Butters both teach a presentations focused communication course to primarily incoming first year students. Paige, I don't know if you're a first year student or not, but I'm so glad that you're here. And the course, since I taught that course for like I said, over 20 years, and it has evolved from being, it has evolved to definitely include data visualization as a core component of the course, or at least a significant portion of the course. We'll ask them about those changes when we get our guests in here. Great to see Jay here from UAE. Jay, it's always great to have you. Sabite from India, thank you for being here. Ahmed from Egypt. And Ivan from Basking Ridge, New Jersey. Welcome, Ivan. So glad that you're here. You know what would be really helpful to us, as well as where you're from, just so that we can see how global our group is tell us what kind of data you need to explain to others. What kind of data do you need to explain to others? Give us a sense of your industry or the types of data you're working with. I work in education and coaching, and so a lot of my data that I'm trying to communicate to people are Things like how many people are attending learning and development events, what kind of impact those learning and development sessions are having, the demographical information, who's showing up, where are they from, what's the demographic on them. We've got Greg here, who's clear and concise data interpretation and explanation of data and its relevance and its so what. Yeah, so this is the goal, right? Regardless of the type of data that we're presenting, we want it to be clear, we want it to be concise, we want that explanation to feel relevant. If our audience has to leave thinking, why did you tell us that? What was that all about? We have not done our job. So Greg, that's great. And what industry are you in? What kind of data are you trying to make clear and concise, Greg? And all of you, that would be great information for us to have. Okay, so let me bring Anna and Rebecca in because they're the ones you really want to meet today. They are the experts in this field. Anna, Rebecca, hi, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Great to see you both. So tell me, I know you've both taught the business presentations course for a long time now, and what is your interest in visualization of data or data storytelling? What got you intrigued by this?
Yeah, Becca, if you're okay if I start?
Please.
Okay. So I would say that storytelling has always been a core element of the class that Becca and I teach. So we are constantly telling students that in order to catch the attention of your audience, in order to have this lasting impact, you have to be able to weave those stories into the facts that you're talking about, because facts alone are not memorable. They're not sticky, but stories are.
Yeah.
So that's always been important for me. And then I would say over the past few years, former students, alumni have told me how they've had to jump into these roles and be able to get buy-in with the data that they're talking about, but they can't just paste up that Excel spreadsheet and expect people to understand and to buy into what they're talking about. So being able to learn how to data storytell was important for them. And then Brenda, you inspired me because if you remember, I came into that class that you were teaching when you were teaching the MBAs and you were talking about data storytelling. And you showed that awesome example from Apple where Apple was talking about their sustainability efforts and initiatives. Rather than just showing that sustainability report, they turned it into a story and an advertisement. And so now whenever I teach my students, I always lead with that example because it's such a wonderful example.
That's great. I love that. I'm glad that the Apple commercial made the rounds because it is a beautiful example of data storytelling. I want to hear Becca's comments on this, but I've noticed that we've got people that Marjorie is dealing with data in healthcare. And so Marjorie, I'm assuming that the kind of data you work with also needs to be crafted into a story rather than just cold hard facts that may leave an audience uninspired. Nina from Connecticut is presenting with learning and development as well as engagement. Okay, so definitely feel you. Teresa, warehouse sales, customer rebates. Okay, thank you. Project and tasks along with marketing for Ruben. This is really helpful. Supporting law enforcement, Chris, in a business analyst role. Okay, and Chris, that's what a lot of our students, for some of their roles are business analysts. And so that audience, when Anna was talking about our alums that we've talked to who've said, I can't just, in fact, our recruiters talk about our students being wizards of Excel. They have some really strong data analysis training at the Kelley School where we've all taught and where they continue to teach. But it's not enough to just be a wizard at Excel and to show that screen like Anna was saying. So business analyst role, we're definitely familiar with that and hopefully have some great tips for you today. Ivan, global marketing, sales trends, market share, consumer insight, visualizations, customer journeys. Ooh, I teach design thinking. So you're tickling my fancy there, Ivan. And so Marjorie says, yeah, sure enough. And Jay is a great scientist that I've worked with for years. particularly in a computational chemist. So his data is incredibly complex, and not only from calculations, but from the literature. Yeah, great. Thank you. And Alyssa, HR analytics. Yay. My start in my career was in HR before I went to the Kelly School. So yeah, turnover, average tenure, head counts, how many people are using which benefits, all of those types of things are things that Alyssa will need to understand as she's telling a story about that, though, not just here's our categories and here's the facts, but what's that story mean? Becca, what was your interest in storytelling? I didn't see you in my MBA class, so I'm not it. What got you involved in this?
So believe it or not, it feels like a former life. I was a science educator. And like Jay, got used to living in numbers and analyzing them. In fact, I thrive in that space. And so teaching the business communication course that I do, coupling numbers and analyzing them with communicating via storytelling is just such a bright creative outlet for me that I've really enjoyed being able to bring to my students and in turn develop a new course on it. So I'm super excited to be innovating in this space.
That's right. It's not just going to be a pillar of the business presentations course or business communication course. It's a standalone course now, right? Or it will be soon?
It will be in the fall, and it will be offered all next year. Very exciting. We are looking at possible avenues to include graduate level programs because healthcare industry, right? There's a whole segment of data visualization and storytelling that we can go into specifically in that industry. So more to come.
I love it. I love it. And for those of you who haven't been on the teaching end or administrative end in academia, getting a new course approved is a nightmare. So the fact that Rebecca jumped through all the hoops and that she and her team have made that happen is really, that's the reason I was doing the happy dance. Like getting a course through is no easy thing, but it does also speak to the value of this content that an entire series of approval levels have said yes and checked off on this new course that they're offering. Paige is working in how environmentally sustainable work improves organizational and employee well-being. Ooh, interesting, Paige. We want you to tell really good stories because that is an interesting story in and of itself. And Ahmed is talking about the best data stories can usually come from statistical processes controls to see machines efficiency. Okay, so you're hoping that people use the statistical process to improve machine efficiency. Is that where I think Ahmed's going? But you need the story to back that up and not just the raw data. Yeah, that's great. I know that in the course, at least when I taught it, one of our fundamental, whenever we talk about communication in general for any audience, we think about audience sort of leading everything. Like that's my motto is audience, audience, audience. Just like in real estate, we talk about location, 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 communication, whether that's a big formal presentation, if that's just a one-on-one chat, if that's you sitting with your laptop, kind of flipping through something with someone, audience, audience, audience is the driver. Does that still ring true when we're talking about data though, or now is it data, data, data?
Yeah, I would say audience is still number one factor that you need to consider before you start this entire process. So understanding who is the most important person in that room that you need to get the buy-in from. So if you're talking to a large audience, it really is best to figure out who's that one important person that's going to have to get underneath that idea and greenlight my idea and figure out what's important to them. What background information do they need? What do they already know about the project? What values do they have that I can maybe even bring up when I'm talking about the idea? So those are all the different types of things that you can consider for that one audience member.
Okay. Great.
Allowing, once you've identified that audience member, allowing every other decision you make after that to follow suit, right? We want to cater everything we say to that specific audience member and design our call to action, our big ask around said person.
So I'm curious if we're in a room, and learners, please feel free to jump in and share your experience and how you've done this. And I've identified that key decision maker, but there are other people in the room whose knowledge level or background on the subject isn't as robust or is more robust. How do I address to a mixed audience? In other words, some are very knowledgeable, some aren't, some have a ton of background, some don't. What do I do?
Yeah.
And learners, please put in how you manage that audience. That's tough.
Yeah, very difficult when you have that mixed audience. I would say one thing that I consider is if there's a group of people that I can meet with before that meeting and explain more information, or if there's a group of people that are not going to know that high level of information that my key decision maker knows, then I might meet with them beforehand to get their buy-in, to explain more of that information.
I love that.
And that could be
the meeting before the meeting.
The meeting before the meeting. It could be the email before the meeting
to
catch people up to speed and give the contextual information needed.
Okay, so you try to bring the folks who don't have as much knowledge sort of up to speed so that you can still key in on that key decision maker. What if it's the other way around? What if the key decision maker is in a room full of, let's say the scientists are in the room, the engineers are in the room, and they know all these technical specs, but the key decision maker doesn't. She or he's floating at this higher level. Then do you feel like you're talking down to the people that know all of this? How do you manage the folks in the room who have less information? Or do you do the pre-meeting then with the decision maker, which is hard to have happen?
You could provide some more context before the meeting, but that might be just noting that in your presentation. Hey, not everyone in the room may understand these acronyms or this background information. So let me just take a few minutes to set that up for everyone in this room so we can all be on the same page.
And that makes a ton of sense of just calling it out. Yeah.
I love what Greg just said. He said level set with the audience, right? Meet with those outliers in advance and bring them up to speed.
Yeah. Thanks, Greg. Appreciate that. If we back up a bit in the chat, Chris talked about weaving qualitative and quantitative data into the same story. You want to speak to that a little bit?
That is essentially what data storytelling is, right? We are weaving together a narrative, which may include both qualitative and quantitative data and information, to tell a coherent story that sticks, most importantly, that's memorable for your audience.
Yeah. And Sharik talks about the visuals bridging that raw data and the real understanding. And certainly that's helpful. And I think we have to wrap that story around the visuals as well, because even visuals, I think, back to that silly meme that I posted, presenting visually does definitely get us on the right track, but it makes the data clearer, easier to understand, that presenting visually. But I don't know that it will influence that, Becca called it the big ask, that the thing that I'm asking you to do, that needs the whole story, the whole narrative to get me from where I sit now to the decision you want me to make or the action you want me to take. Yeah. Michael loves the word sticky. Oh, hi, Michael. Michael's also an instructor at the Kelly School. That's great. And you're right. It's a great description of a good story. All right. Okay. We keep using the words story. We've talked about audience a little bit. Anything else on audience that we should think about when you talked about customizing every decision that you make after you've identified that original key decision maker? What are some of those decisions we might make? How are we customizing decisions?
Yeah.
Like we've talked about knowledge level a little bit, obviously. We don't want to talk above or below that key decision maker's knowledge level. Are there other key considerations? relevant to that audience?
Potentially your credibility with them. So where do you stand in terms of credibility? And that will come in a little bit later when you organize your content. Where do you put your big ask? Do you put it at the beginning? Do you put it more at the end? That all depends on where you stand with that trust and credibility with that key decision maker. So I think that's something that you needed to take in consideration too, of how do you begin your presentation? How do you begin your story? How do you begin the process of getting to the ask?
Right. I don't know if all of you are familiar with Shark Tank, but it's that like straight up pitch. You make your ask in the first 5 seconds or 10 seconds. And that's great if my audience has a lot of credibility, if I have a lot of credibility with my audience. If they don't know me or trust me yet, then maybe I hold that big request until I've had a chance to tell the story with the quantitative data backing up that story, weaving that story with me to build my credibility and the credibility of my ask first. So yeah, even the organizational structure is one of those decisions that may be affected by my audience analysis. Anything else that I should, when you said customize every decision you make? I love that comment, Rebecca. What are those decisions I'm making and how do I customize?
I think another key thing that has helped me and my students in the classroom is determining what are the benefits that the audience will encounter as a result of implementing your idea. And also, most importantly, what's at stake if they don't?
Yeah.
What happens if they decide this isn't for us right now? What is the fallout from that? So determining both benefits and what's at stake is important.
And that's a great nuance. I always talk about what's in it for them of taking my action, but what's going to happen if they don't is the flip side of that coin that I probably underestimate sometimes. Sharik, that's a great question. It's a sticky widget question here. How do we balance data integrity with the creative liberties that are needed to tell a compelling, memorable data story? Do you guys want to attack that one a little bit? Because that is a great question.
It is really about centering the data you decide to share around your call to action, your big ask that is tailored to your audience. I know that's a lot in one response. I get what you're saying, Sharik. We can manipulate data to have it say whatever we need it to say in the moment. But the way I view data storytelling is I am going to simplify this down to its purest form so that I can then implement my narrative framework into it to make it more compelling for my audience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think what's important too is to be able to tell that story, but then point back to that data and show this is exactly where it came from. So then it's proving that you've not manipulated the data in any way. So being able to show the data in its simplest form as well is important.
Yeah. The two things that come to me, Sharik, are that sometimes I think we mistakenly assume that data integrity means I have to show you every last piece of data. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's true. I don't think I should hide data that is relevant to the story, but that the idea that the only way to be honest to the data is to show everything about everything, that doesn't allow you to create any kind of narrative. So being selective about the data, not in order to hide things, but in order to tell one coherent story, I think is an important piece, and letting go of this sense that we have to data dump, that we have to share every little stat that we found, every analysis that we ran. A lot of people don't care about very many of those. So that's one piece for me. And I think the other one is, and I wish I don't have this deck in front of me and it would take me too long to find it, but I have a graph that shows how often the sales team met a particular target. And the graph is exactly the same on two different slides. And all I've changed is the title. In one title, I say something like, missed our target 4 times this year. So the story that I'm trying to say is we got a problem and we need to fix it. In the other one, I said, we've met our target 18 times this year. Both are true. I did not change the graph. The visual is exactly the same. All I changed was the title, because one title told the story I wanted to tell. The action that back to Becca's thing, like, what is the ask? Drive to that. Mm-hmm. And one of those takeaway titles got me there, and one of them drove me in a different direction. Both were absolutely true. So that is maybe an example of a creative liberty. It was my choice of how to frame the very same data without manipulating it.
And how you frame that data also should go back to your audience. What do you think they would be driven to act on? A positive or something that they potentially could lose out on? So I think that's what you have to do some research on. What are they more influenced by?
Yeah.
Being scared, or hey, this is a positive.
Right. So know your audience. Again, what's the motivator there? Greg was picking up on our conversation about, should we start with the big ask, or do we hold it until we build some credibility? His question was, can we say there is going to be an ask? I'll get to that later. Is that a way to kind of lean into it, but without tipping too much of your hand, without the credibility?
You can, but you could run the risk of the audience getting tired of hearing all of the buildup without hearing your recommendation. So I would either lead it, again, based on your credibility and other factors too, like how much time do you have? Do you have a lot of time to explain that background information and end up with the recommendation at the end? What kind of, I'm trying to think of other things, Becca, that we talk about just even within our class, of whether you should consider leading with it or ending with it.
Typically, we always coach, provide a compelling reason to continue listening. Instead of giving that big reveal, your big ask, instead give that compelling insight or hook to get them to continue wanting to listen as you build your credibility up until that ask.
Sure.
Yeah. Maybe I don't tell you that there's going to be an ask, or maybe I do, to your point, Greg, but I, at the very least, ask and promise to answer a question that I know is on the minds of my listeners. That thing that's keeping them up at night. If I can say, we've dug into the data, we have some answers about this question that you're losing sleep over, I've got their attention. They're going to stay with me now until I do get to that recommendation. So we've talked a lot about audience. That word story keeps coming up over and over and over, or narrative, coherent narrative, a story. And we've even got Sharik asking, like, oh, okay, story sounds like a fable. It sounds fictional. And we're talking about data. We're talking about facts and truth and things like that. So what do you mean by storytelling? How does data tell a story? Can you talk us through that a little bit?
Sure. Becca, do we want to pull up slides to show?
Yes.
Okay. Do we want to first talk about storyboarding and then how storyboarding leads into the structure of a story? Brenda, does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay.
I think for our listeners, one of the great reasons to understand the storyboarding process is it's going to save you so much time when you are putting the presentation together. So you're not just starting with a blank page or, recreating the wheel every time. You've got this structure. Go ahead.
And what I like to tell my students too is, rather than, I feel like so often we waste so much time creating slides that we end up not using. So storyboarding is a great way to prevent you from wasting all of that effort, because good slides take a long time. So when you think of storyboarding, you should think of all of these areas that I might throw out on my storyboard could be a single slide, but maybe some could be combined and some might be thrown out. So with storyboarding, that's when you begin the structure of your story before creating that first slide. And it could be done with sticky notes. I love the idea of sticky notes. If you're on a team and you're trying to put together a presentation or some kind of pitch, you could stand up, a lot of times standing up and looking down at a table with a big piece of paper and just throwing out all the ideas that could potentially go into the story. That's kind of how you start the storyboarding process. And you should always have a discard pile. So some ideas might get thrown to the waste, but the great thing about sticky notes is that you might be able to bring them back depending on which direction you go in. If you're doing more virtual work or working with a virtual team, you could use Google Slides, some kind of software where it allows you to at least put your ideas to the side if you're not sure you're going to put them back in. But I wanted to create this slide for you because this just shows all the options that you could build into your presentation that might fit within that story that you share with everyone. Anything to add?
I'm taking a look at these to see if I have questions over any of these. The historical or environmental context. Again, this is a great example of why knowing your audience matters. If they know why they're at this meeting, they know the history. Don't spend time, don't waste time on that, right? That might end up in the discard pile, but yes. In other cases, it might be really important.
And too often we spend too much time with that historical or environmental context, and we end up boring the audience, or they're demanding, just get to your ask, just get to your reason why you're here today. Another thing that I wanted to bring up about storyboarding is that you could storyboard little chunks of your presentation. So think about, like, if you're writing a book, you could storyboard the entire book, but you can also storyboard individual chapters. Okay. You can do that with your presentation, outline your entire presentation, but then also storyboard individual parts of your presentation.
All right. What does biases to address mean? Can you give us an example of what that might look like in a presentation? Why would we want to address a bias in a presentation of our data?
Becca, do you have anything there?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Brenda. Possibly data, this is such a wide topic, data. There's, as we know, a lot of fields people are coming from. Think in your own industry, what types of biases might impact the outcomes or assumptions made based on the data collection. We had a conversation earlier about not taking advantage of the data, but distilling it down to simplify your message. So the biases to address come in there. It's hard to answer that without a specific example.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking of maybe this falls in a different category, but like maybe it's an assumption I make or a bias that I have about reading data is that I assume just at a glance of a slide that that positive is good, that above the line is always better than below the line, that an upward trend is always a good trend. But that's not always the case. In some cases, I want my data to trend in a different direction. Below the line is the good thing, having if we're reporting safety incidents, for example, I want the number to go down. We didn't have as many incidents last quarter as we did the quarter before. That's a good thing. But so I call that out pretty quickly if the data looks counterintuitive to how we're used to playing with data.
Sure. And Chris even noted here too, if the source of the data has already has an inherent bias because of how it was sourced, that should be explained too. I think that's a great point to make. Where is it coming from? If it's from a certain area or a certain department or something, or even the way that the question was worded, maybe that's something to address too.
And then Megan takes it hi Megan, great to see you. Megan takes it in a different direction. She's another one of our IU friends. She's working with student retention data. And so there are audience biases automatically sort of built in. And then if the data looks to corroborate that or to negate that, that's something that you've kind of got to get to your audience mindset and say, now, hey, wait, before we even look at this, let's make sure we're not making assumptions about this or that. So that's great. Thank you. Great example, Megan. Appreciate that. Okay, so we're building our story. We know that these are some different categories of Post-it notes or Google Slides that we might create. We might throw them in the discard pile. We might spend 30 seconds on one and 20 minutes on another, depending on the audience analysis.
Get feedback from storyboarding. So once you place it in that linear fashion that you think, okay, this is how I'm going to tell the story. Take a step back, get feedback from colleagues. Get feedback from maybe someone who's not seeing it the way that you're seeing it, just to understand, am I getting the entire picture here? Yeah. And get that feedback earlier rather than later. I think the more I work on a presentation, the more I get sort of entrenched in how I'm going to do it, and I'm more resistant to feedback. But if I haven't put much time into it, then it's easy to go, oh yeah, that's a good idea. I hadn't thought about that. Flip flop and start rearranging things. And that's why you don't create slides, because it's like this thing, once you create a slide, you feel tied to it. You're like, I have to show this. I have to show it because I've spent so much time on this slide. So do this before you create the slides. And then the next part is creating the actual story. So do you want to? Yeah. Okay. So there's kind of two areas that you could go in. I would say this one is the more simple, quick way to tell a data story. But data stories, no matter what, whether you use this one or we'll talk about the next process, which is the Freytag pyramid or the narrative arc, they use the 4 C's. So you've got to have these 4 areas in order for it to be that full data story, because it guides the audience from this is my information to this is the insight. So these, the context, you've got to make sure that you have some kind of, at least starting the background or the setting. Characters, who's involved? Is there a department? Are there a group of people involved with this? What's the conflict? It could be some kind of challenge, problem, opportunity. And then here's the next step. Here's my recommendation. This is what we need to do in order for it to happen. I would be very curious for our learners to put in maybe who your characters are, because I think sometimes I start thinking, well, the numbers are my characters. The numbers are the actors in this story, and they're not. Every one of these numbers represents a human. So if you're thinking about a presentation and you're attending this because you want to get the data story just right for an upcoming presentation or meeting, who are the characters that you're focusing on within your storyline? Or what's the conflict? Give us, pick one of these C's and give us a 1-sentence description of what your context is or who your characters are. What's the challenge or the problem, the tension that your numbers are helping us understand or feel or see? Maybe you've got your conclusion. Maybe you know what your resolution is. But if you could, without violating any confidentiality, just give us a 1-sentence description with it labeled. Is that your context? Is that your character, conflict, or conclusion? To really try to start solidifying these 4 C's that will drive your thought pattern. Okay, so you said the 4 C's need to be in whatever format we use. And then you said something about a Freytag pyramid. You want to talk about that a little bit? Yeah, so the Freytag pyramid would be more for that emotional appeal, stories with a clear transformation or evolution. So this could be a longer story. Let me get to that slide. And it might be easier for them to list the 4 C's or even structure their recommendation once they see our example, because we've got an example too using this. So this is data storytelling using Freytag's pyramid. So it becomes more meaningful when it follows this arc. So you can see some of the 4 C's are right here, but there's just a little bit more detail here. You've got your rising points to support that setting, that background information. It reveals more details into the problem or the opportunity. You've got that climax or the aha moment. This is what we're going to do. This is our major finding. And then the implications of that insight. And then that's when you could put the solution and next steps. Or again, depending on your audience, you could put that at the beginning and then go in that same order.
When you listen to presentations that the people you coach make, which one of these sections seems to be the most neglected? Which one do we leave out, or which one do we overemphasize? Do you see any patterns in how people don't tell a good story?
I see mainly that rising action and falling action, a lack of effort in those areas. The setting and hook, that initial context is usually really great. Then we have our aha moment, that climax part where they do a really good job sharing the central insights. Potentially, you could put your ask there as well. And then that falling action can be a trailing down of tension that you built up in your rising points. And then the next steps, that solution would be more implementation. How do we actually put this into action? So there's a lot of flexibility within this framework that you can work with, but typically that rising and falling action is where I see they gloss over it. Yes.
Yeah. I see it a lot in the next steps where they might give the solution. Here's my recommendation, but okay, that's it. And people walk out the door not knowing, well, what do I have to do in order to make this happen? So providing the next steps, what do I need from my audience in order to make this a reality?
Yeah.
And oftentimes with that, if you can provide a mechanism to make your big idea happen, your audience is so much more likely to enact your idea.
Very true.
Yeah. Just making those next steps so easy to take that why wouldn't I? It's so easy. Of course I'll do this, which takes some work on the presenter's part to break it down in that way, to make it tolerable, manageable, etc. I am confident that a lot of people who came today were hoping to look at some charts and graphs and understand some actual tactics that you recommend for weaving the visualization of the data into these great story formats. What are some of your best tips for making our data visual?
Sure. Do you care, Brenda? Oh,
sorry. We have a process. Anna, do you want to share the process that we've kind of like a makeover?
Yeah. So let's start with that example. So seeing storytelling in action, or data storytelling in action, and using this Freytag's pyramid. So this is a company that was having issues with burnout and turnover. So HR decided to survey hundreds of people and noticed within that survey that there was elevated stress scores across all the departments. Of course, the rising action, then we start to see, once we start to look at more information, there were a lot of issues with sick days and turnover. So that aha moment was, all right, we've got this issue. Let's pilot in one division these weekly wellness check-ins, access to mental health resources, workload rebalancing. We're just going to do it in one area and see what happens. After 6 months, absences dropped by 30%, engagement scores rose by 22%. And what the ask is now is to invest in it across all departments, and leadership commitment is needed. So we need to scale the wellness intervention company-wide. So that's kind of the Freytag's pyramid in action with this one example. So I'm starting to think, okay, what could we do to show this visually? And what I was talking about at the very beginning was just kind of a data dump. We could create a slide that had the data that we received from HR. But
this slide would take me so long to make any sense of. Like, I see the numbers and it looks clean. It's not like a messy, ugly slide, but I'm like, it means nothing.
We see this so often.
Yes.
We see this nicely done Excel spreadsheet, And you think, oh, they should be able to look at this and figure it out. But think, if we're standing and presenting or even having a conversation, I'm no longer listening to you because I'm trying to figure out what's on this spreadsheet. And also something to note, the title on the slide, what does that mean? What insight does that give to what we're trying to talk about? So let's take it a step further. Okay, let's make it visual. Let's make a chart out of it. But now we're providing too much information. We've got all these different departments that had nothing to do with this pilot program. So it's overwhelming. What does this actually show? Again, the takeaway is unclear, especially if you are talking and they're trying to, it's not digestible.
Okay.
So then we take it a step further. Okay, we're getting there.
Yeah.
We've got an easier to digest chart. But Becca, did you want to bring up the color issue?
Yeah, I'd love to bring in a couple concepts. There's something called cognitive burden. And sometimes within data, we have inherent cognitive burden where our audience is going to have to devote some energy from their brains to understand what's going on with your data representation. But there is another part of cognitive burden that we can actually lower for our audience to make the key insights really pop and stand out with minimal effort from our audience. So here you can see there is some cognitive burden still, believe it or not, in understanding it. I think the next slide will showcase this more, but Anna was talking about accessibility as well. Typically, any audience that we speak to, we can assume that about 5% are colorblind. The top two colors that colorblind people cannot differentiate are red and green. How often do we see data visualizations in red and green? Red denotes negative typically, green denotes positive, as you can see here in this very simple data visualization. We are negating 5% of our audience by simple color choice. So this idea of accessibility is also something to heavily consider when choosing your colorways, your color story. Sometimes you may be bound to branding for your company. And if that's the case, stick to your branding colorway story. But when you have creative license, you might consider accessibility. The most accessible colors, it has been shown, are blue and orange.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay.
Even for our 5% colorblind population, those two colors are the easiest to differentiate.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dana.
Yeah,
I'm intrigued by the text on the side and how we feel about that. I found myself being torn between wanting to read the bullet and look at the chart. Mainly I wanted to look at the chart, but I was like, but the bullets are there. Maybe I should read those.
Ideally, you would use the animation feature here and maybe start with the chart and then show additional information as you start to go through and explaining. Okay. So I just wanted to show that sometimes just putting up a chart is not the best option, because if people are looking at your slides outside of the presentation, the context is unclear. So this provides a bit more context to what is the chart even saying here? What's the takeaway? Well, these three things happened, and because of that, burnout related absences dropped. So that allows just more information to be shared during the presentation to follow along, as well as outside the presentation. You
had commented on the title early on. You said you weren't in love with the title.
Yeah, can I show you my ideal title?
What's a better title? Yeah, where do we end here? What happens next?
So it's called takeaway titles. So takeaway titles allow there to be just more information. And this is the main point that I'm trying to make on this slide, And because that in the Western world, audiences read from left to right, prime real estate is at the top. So we want to make sure that we have a clear takeaway at the top of our slide, because that's where our eyes are going to look at first. So the takeaway
it's interesting
is
that after 6-month burnout, what's in the title now and gets prime real estate, first read, was kind of buried. If you could go back just one slide, it was at the very bottom, wasn't it? That very same, yeah, there it was on this slide, but who even got there? Yeah.
But so not prime real estate.
Not in prime real estate. That's right. And if I'm just flipping through a deck, you're right. I'm reading those titles. Yeah, I love that. It does mean people have to write titles that are much longer than we're accustomed to. Is that okay? That's best practice now?
That is best practice. Yeah, because you should be able to, there's an option in PowerPoint where you take a look at all of your slides in one view, and you should be able to read the titles in your slides, and it should read in that flow that you want to tell your story in. And you should be able to just look, or your audience should be able to just look at your title slides and be able to understand what your takeaway is.
Oh, listeners, I love that. I want to challenge all of you to flip through your deck, read just your titles. And do you have a story, or do you just have a bunch of sort of placeholders? I think that would be a great action item for all of you as you leave today.
It's hard. It takes a lot of time. But one area that I would love to encourage them to use is use AI to help you create those assertions. I like to call them assertions because it's making some kind of claim within your title. But oh my gosh, I use that all the time when I'm creating slides, because that's just an area where you don't need to spend too much time on. Yeah. So here
coach people, AI is your best friend when it comes to generating those takeaway titles. And I also encourage my students when coaching them on this to add a verb and make it as splashy and catchy as possible, or sticky, as we like to say.
Right.
That's where the AI comes in handy.
Yeah, you could even prompt the AI and make a sticky takeaway title or a sticky assertion that has a verb that summarizes this data or captures the conclusion of this particular data. Prompt it with all of those specifics that you want it to be, and ask for 10 options and pick the best or massage the best and get it in your title line. Yeah. Takeaway titles. Take that away, friends. Takeaway titles is one of our takeaways. Red or orange and blue, a takeaway. Use a storyline. Great takeaway. Yeah, go ahead.
And notice here, this is just one little comment, but even removing the grid lines behind the chart allows you, it's more appealing looking to the eye.
Reduces that cognitive burden that Becca had introduced to us. Just get rid of the fluff, and the lines weren't serving us. We can tell the 45 from 65 just as readily here without those lines. Yeah.
And then another way that you could consider representing this, Stephen Few, who has written several data visualization books, coins it best. He calls them big ass numbers or bands. And sometimes when you have bands, it's best just to put simple text on your slide with that takeaway title. It really conveys your point. So you don't always need a graph.
Yeah. Another option could be here, I could just show a big 65% and then a big 45% in the numbers. And I have a student example here that shows that.
Yeah, or a 30% and a down arrow. You know, we reduced turnover absentee rates by 30%. 30% is the band.
Yeah. So here, just they're making their point by just displaying those numbers again with the takeaway title and with some context below those numbers. But again, like the impact of the numbers is amazing here.
Yeah. And there's still that visual representation of the chart.
True.
But not, and it's such a simple but powerful way. Great example.
I I made one just to show you the difference of what I often see so many people do
Yes.
when listing numbers. You know, you've got, again, just Generation Z. Well, what about Generation Z? You've got the classic photo of some college
Random stock image.
hanging out. Yes. And then the numbers listed there. But look how dynamic that is compared to what we typically see.
Yeah.
Good slides take some time.
They take some time, but you're right. We do see way too much of that other one, don't we? I love that.
Yes.
Well, learners, I hope you have. Why don't you in the chat give us your takeaway? I've been trying to capture some of those for you. What action are you going to take? What are you going to do differently as a result of being here today than you have been doing with your data presentations? What's the one thing you will do differently? And while they're doing that in chat, telling us their takeaway, their new action item, Anna, Becca, any closing ideas or thoughts you want to share with us about data storytelling?
Becca, I wanted to give you the opportunity. I know that your former student is here and you really wanted to show her example.
Yeah, let's see it. Let's see it.
So it's
is this Paige's work?
No, unfortunately, it's not Paige's work, but Paige was amazing in my class. And she actually just was featured in a poster presentation session at the Center for Women in Technology. So she's actually doing research and has a very promising career ahead of her, hopefully as a researcher. But this was an example from this past week in my classroom that I had a student pitching a Lego IKEA collaboration. And you can see here everything we've talked about in practice. We've chosen an effective visual time series, typically are represented best with line graphs. She's removed a ton of clutter. This is very easy to see. She's put a big red circle around where she wants us to focus. We have a great takeaway title that's catchy. So highly impactful visual that we can just simply see and understand instead of devoting a lot of energy to understand.
Yeah. Lego is growing. I get it I see it. I get it. There is no question in my mind, and it establishes the credibility of the data to see it so clearly. I wouldn't, and not just growing, but growing exponentially. You know, that becomes that clear without her even having to say that to me or him to say that. That's great. I love that. Megan is going to budget time to create really compelling slides. Okay, Megan, we'll look for those in future presentations. And Dana is going to cover the main point of the slide under the main title, or make it the main title. Yeah, you don't even need to have it be the subpoint. It could, that sentence with the verb and the action is great. Shelby's guilty of doing the slides first. Yeah, so get your sticky notes out, Shelb. I know you've got them.
Less is more. Yes.
Yeah.
Before starting creates. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, Ivan, great. Pages, don't use too much bold text. That's right. Or anything that clutters the slide. We think we're emphasizing, but if we emphasize everything, we really emphasized nothing. So that was a great takeaway too, Paige. Becca, Anna, thank you so much for your insights, for your time today. I know you're busy, especially this time of the semester. So thank you so much. Learners, thank you for your interaction. I hope you were reading I know we didn't read every comment, but there was some great guidance to one another. So check that out. Stay in touch with one another and with us. And good luck creating great data stories. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Brenda.
Thank you.